Hello, everybody. I'm excited to have with us today Akhil Iyer. He is the Director for Polio Eradication for UNICEF. He's the big dog on polio at UNICEF. This is a really rare opportunity for us. Of course, this comes because we're here at the College of Physicians of Philadelphia celebrating World Polio Day here, and all the great minds like Akhil have come together. So stick around. You don't want to miss this episode.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
This episode is made possible via the support of our sponsors, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd. Akhil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Devin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. Thank you very much for making time for us. And what you're doing is extraordinarily important work. You've been working on this for a while, though, polio eradication. It's part of your career for a while.
Yes, I've been in UNICEF almost all of my working life, and in many of the countries I've worked in, such as Afghanistan, Angola and Yemen, to name a few, there was polio.
Yeah.
And it's been extremely challenging, but also gratifying to make progress against this disease.
Over that span of years, you certainly have made tremendous progress. I mean, the number of cases this year is lower than last year, is lower than the year before, and so on for several years. So it's great progress, heading in the right direction. At the same time, you had to have hoped we could get finished earlier. How do you feel that tug of war between great progress but not quite where you hope to be? How does that feel?
I always try and feel optimistic. Maybe I'm an optimistic person. I might feel differently if the progress had not been so tremendous over the last 30 years. We had something like 350,000 cases a year in 1988.
Yeah.
We went down to 22 cases in only 2 countries last year. That's not a 99% decrease, that's a 99.9% decrease. So the progress is tremendous and extremely significant. Now, having said that, we all wanted to finish off polio a long time ago. We set some deadlines. Those deadlines haven't been met. And it has proven very difficult to finish off polio in these last remaining countries, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nigeria. These countries represent some of the most difficult working conditions in the world in terms of reaching the children due to conflict and insecurity. Also, geographic access is very, very challenging.
Yeah.
But I still feel very optimistic that we're going to get to the finish line.
That's good. As you look at this from a global perspective, as you do, clearly much of your attention has to be on Pakistan and Afghanistan, but at the same time, there are children all around the world who need to be immunized. You know, the sort of proverbial one plane ride away from polio. How do you think about what's going on in places like Angola and Yemen, where there haven't been cases recently, but could come back?
So even though the priority is rightfully on Afghanistan and Pakistan, and also Nigeria, which is the 3rd endemic country, even though they haven't seen the wild polio virus since over 2 years, we have to support polio eradication in many more countries than that. So, for example, this past year, we've been supporting polio immunization activities in 60 countries. And we do that because these countries all remain vulnerable to the polio virus, which, as you rightly say, can travel across borders. And if children are not immunized, they remain vulnerable. And so no place is safe in the world until we get rid of polio in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Nigeria, and everywhere else.
Yeah.
So the program is not just concentrating on the 2 or 3 places where the virus remains. It's much more broader than that.
Yeah. There's a unique problem here in the United States. There is an active and apparently growing anti-vaccine movement here. So there are an increasing number of children who aren't immunized against polio or anything else here in the United States. How much does that worry you? I realize the United States isn't part of your catchment area per se, but certainly you must think about this.
So it is a concern, and it's not a concern that's limited only to the United States. We see anti-vaccination movements throughout the world in a number of countries. And even within the context of the current global polio program, one of the many challenges is the fact that some families refuse polio vaccination. And there are nasty things going on, such as videos against polio vaccination, spreading myths that go viral. And it's therefore very important to engage in communication to counter these false messages, and also to create a more active demand for polio vaccination and for immunization in general. And part of the work and part of the responsibility of UNICEF is to lead the efforts on behavioral change communication, to create an active and flowing demand among parents to get their children vaccinated against polio. And when there are families who refuse the polio vaccine, to engage in communication and social mobilization work aimed at converting those refusals, and resulting in a situation where these families who are refusing the vaccine start to actively accept and demand the polio vaccine, in addition to other essential basic health services.
With obvious irony, I occasionally encounter Rotarians who are anti-vaxxers, as we sometimes call them. If you were talking to one of those good people, what would be the message you would most want to convey to someone who is skeptical of the value or concerned about the dangers of vaccines?
I would convey essentially the facts. The millions of lives saved because children have been vaccinated against polio, but also against a number of vaccine-preventable diseases. Just putting the facts on the table. Now, because it's Rotarian in this hypothetical example, I would point out that something in the order of 16 million children are walking today who would have otherwise been paralyzed by polio, thanks in large part to the support of Rotary International, among other partners. But Rotary International has been perhaps the most catalytic organization from the start. Even before the Global Polio Eradication Initiative was officially launched in 1988, Rotary was at it.
Yeah. As you think about circling back to the beginning, you have a tremendous frame of reference because you led UNICEF in Afghanistan. What are the things that we need to do there that are the most challenging to bring polio to its end?
Arguably the most important thing in Afghanistan is to find ways to reach the children with polio vaccination in conflict-ridden and sometimes inaccessible areas. So we have to use a number of access strategies that permit vaccinators to sometimes cross the lines of conflict to reach the children. that is arguably the most important thing in Afghanistan at this moment. The other thing that I would point out is surveillance, the ability to detect, to find the cases and to find the virus in the environmental samples, in the sewage, is also extremely important.
Yeah.
You have to have surveillance in order to be sure that you've got rid of the disease.
Yeah. One of the important distinctions between polio and smallpox, which is the only other disease that,
Yes.
I say the only other, it's the only disease we've ever eradicated, right?
Yes.
Was that everyone who contracted smallpox got smallpox.
Yes.
But only about 1 in 200 people who get the polio virus develop acute placid paralysis.
Yes.
Placid paralysis, right? I said that wrong. I'm a novice here, so I waded into the deep end of the pool and got in trouble. So explain how that works and how difficult that makes polio eradication.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. That's one of the reasons why polio eradication is difficult, because it is estimated that for every case of paralysis, there are actually 200 kids that are infected, but they don't show the symptoms. So it's actually hard to find the virus. It's easy to find it if
You got smallpox on your face,
right, or if you have, unfortunately, paralysis
right,
in your limbs. And that's one of the challenges, to find the virus, to find those reservoirs, as we call them, where the virus is hiding or harboring.
So that's why the environmental surveillance is such an important part of the polio eradication effort. Yes,
the environmental surveillance, basically searching and detecting if the virus is in the environment or in the sewage, is extremely important, as is the surveillance or the ability to find the cases of paralysis caused by polio. Yeah. Both components of surveillance are very important, and the sooner you detect the presence of the virus, the quicker and more effective your response can be through campaigns.
You've been at UNICEF a while.
It's a long time.
What are you most proud of having accomplished?
So it's been extremely gratifying to work in countries on polio eradication, and then after a while, after a lot of perseverance, not see polio cases anymore. We call it interrupting transmission. That's one of the most gratifying things that I've experienced in my time with UNICEF. I joined UNICEF in 1989, 1 year after the global polio eradication initiative was officially launched. So to see countries that I've worked in, such as Yemen, Angola, Niger, the country north of Nigeria, to become and remain polio-free and sustain that has been one of the most gratifying things that I've been associated with. I feel very honored and privileged to be able to be among the many people working towards a polio-free world.
Wow.
And I'm optimistic, as I said, that we're going to get there.
What's the most important lesson you've learned over your career?
There are probably a number of lessons, but if I were to mention one, it would be the value of partnership. And if I think that lesson is particularly applicable in the fight against polio. I think our success to date towards polio eradication is largely attributable to the partnership that we've forged. There's so many different partners. There are too many to mention and too many to thank, but each partner has a comparative advantage or a unique value and has played a pivotal role. I don't think we would have achieved what we've achieved to date if the partnership wasn't as extensive and as close as it has been.
Yeah. I'm not you. I lack your perspective. We've already established that. But I have looked for and have not found another collaboration in the public health arena, in fact, really in any arena, that is quite like the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. It seems to me to be unique. Could you identify a parallel structure anywhere else?
No, you're absolutely right. I agree completely. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative, GPEI, as we like to call it, because it's shorter to say it that way, is unique. Now there are other partnerships on other health issues or other development issues that are also effective. But in my experience, GPEI is unique because it's the extent and the depth and the focus of the partnership and the partners towards this specific goal is unprecedented as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's a key reason why we've been able to get this close to eradicating this disease.
I look at that partnership and think it is remarkable how it has lasted 30 years with all of, kept people at the table for 30 years. Egos have failed to kill it, either institutional or individual egos. And you think about all of the high-powered, influential people who've come through that room, been a part of that process, and no one's ever managed to kill it. Why do you think that is? That it's survived? Maybe it seems to me that ego would be the biggest threat to a partnership like this, because each partner has had to give up a measure of control and a measure of credit for solving this huge global problem.
Absolutely. So I think we've been fortunate that egos have been checked at the door as different people have come into the partnership, including some very influential and powerful individuals. Now, their influence hasn't been checked at the door. It's been channeled to help us sometimes convince high-level people such as presidents and prime ministers about the importance of polio eradication and what has to go on at the country level. I think the spearheading core partner agencies, of which UNICEF is one, but there's also Rotary, CDC, World Health Organization, and the Gates Foundation, have essentially ceded some of the control and some of the authority that they normally exercise over other programs that they support, and decided to do it collectively. So I don't think this program is going to fail. I think this program is going to succeed, but the credit will not go to any one individual or any one organization. It will be collective, and the celebration should be collective. And when we honor everyone who's contributed, I think special recognition should go to the tens of thousands of frontline workers who've been vaccinated in children under some of the most difficult and dangerous conditions and circumstances in the whole world.
It is remarkable. When I visited Pakistan, I met with some of these remarkable, almost universally women, right, that are the frontline workers, many of them young women. And in Pakistan especially, they've been vulnerable to attacks. I mean, they're remarkable human beings. Great point. They deserve credit. Well, you are an extraordinarily capable person, and you could have done anything. You could have been a Wall Street investment banker. You could have been a Hollywood mogul. Who knows what all the things you could have done. As you look back on it, why were you drawn to the polio effort, and why have you devoted so much of your career to it?
Well, Devin, I don't think I could be an investment banker, nor a Hollywood mogul, and many other things. I became involved in humanitarian and development work, starting as a volunteer with non-governmental organizations, and I was very fortunate to find a way to work over the last 30 years or so in this field, and circumstance brought me to countries that were suffering from polio. I saw the crippling effects of the disease, not just in those countries I was posted in with UNICEF, but I had also seen it in the communities in Canada, where I grew up. I'm Canadian. And I understand what a devastating and terrible disease it is. And I just feel so privileged to have the opportunity to be associated with ending it once and for all. As I said, I think it was a bit of circumstance and timing that led me to countries that had very, very challenging situations with regards to polio, and I found myself in a situation where I could maybe make a difference.
Yeah.
And I just, as an average person, I just did my utmost to make that happen. But I'm one of many, and it's a very extensive partnership.
Yeah. Akhil, what is your superpower?
I don't have a superpower. I'm just an average guy. But if I had one, I would like to, wave my wand and end all conflict in the world, which is causing, tremendous suffering and loss of life, and children are ever more directly affected by war and conflict. And if I could end it all and create a peaceful environment everywhere, that's what I would do. And that would, among other things, go a long way to helping us end polio even sooner.
That's a fascinating insight, and I know our time is running short, but I want to explore one final topic with you that builds on that. You spent time working in Angola.
Yes.
Angola experienced a 30-year civil war?
Yes, that's right.
And you were working on polio eradication in that context. Is there anything you take away from that experience that is applicable in Afghanistan today?
The one thing that I would mention is, for the success of the polio eradication program in places like Angola and Afghanistan, it's absolutely essential that the polio program remain neutral and impartial. It's not about politics. There are no politics in the polio program.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about reaching the children and preventing the disease that cripples.
Yeah.
And that's how we've been able to discuss the importance of polio vaccination with all sides, all parties to a conflict, whether it's in Afghanistan or in Angola at the time, and in fact create an enabling environment that permits and has permitted us in Angola to cross the lines of the conflict and reach the children.
Yeah.
So that maintenance of neutrality and impartiality is the one thing that I would mention.
Yeah. It seems like, and forgive me, I hope you have time. It seems like ISIS, or Daesh, or whatever we want to call it this week, has been more accommodating of polio vaccination in Syria than the Taliban has been in Afghanistan. Am I misreading that?
Well, We had a nasty outbreak of what is called vaccine-derived polio in Syria, and part of the problem was not being able to access an area of Syria which was under the control of ISIS. Now there was some negotiation. Often in a conflict situation, you have to negotiate for safe access for the frontline workers. And thankfully, that outbreak was brought under control in Syria, and we haven't seen polio cases in over a year, and that outbreak has officially been declared closed. So that's good news. In the case of the Taliban in Afghanistan, they have permitted, with some stops and starts and some problems along the way, they have permitted polio vaccination. The reason is because the program has been presented as a neutral and impartial program. So polio vaccinators and polio social mobilizers, the frontline workers, the true heroes in the fight against polio, are able to vaccinate in areas that are under the control or partially under the control of groups such as the Taliban, and that has been one of the reasons why we've been able to decrease the number of polio cases in countries like Afghanistan over the last few years. It's just that we're not yet at zero.
Right.
We can still access more and more children. There are pockets in Afghanistan where we can't reach children, but we're getting there.
That's inspiring. That's inspiring. Well, listen, I've taken too much of your time, Akhil. Thank you so much for the time you've given us and for the great work you're doing. Is there a place on the internet you might point our listeners to find more information about the work that UNICEF is doing in polio eradication?
Yes, I would draw our listeners to the website www.polioeradication.org. It's an excellent website which not only shows the work being done by UNICEF in terms of buying and distributing all of the vaccines, some of the communication work, but it shows the work of the broader partnership, which we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I'd also like to thank you, Devin, for the opportunity to talk about polio eradication on World Polio Day.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. We wish you every success in the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thank you for listening. Devin Thorpe's mission is to end extreme poverty, improve global health, and mitigate climate change before 2045 by finding and sharing the stories of those who are doing the most good. You can join with other listeners to accelerate Devin's mission by visiting helpdevin.org right now.